Hey guys, preference shares are a crucial corporate finance tool that companies use to raise capital while offering investors certain preferential rights. Unlike ordinary shares, preference shares provide holders with benefits such as priority in receiving dividends and liquidation proceeds. However, they typically do not grant voting rights unless specifically structured to do so. Under common law, preference shares are governed by contractual and equitable principles, allowing companies to define their rights and obligations flexibly. In Singapore, the Companies Act regulates preference shares, particularly Section 75, which permits companies to issue shares with varying rights, so long as these are clearly set out in the company's constitution or shareholder agreement. Understanding the nature of preference shares is essential for both business owners and investors, as they play a unique role in corporate finance and investment strategies. Companies issue preference shares for several reasons. One of the most significant advantages is the ability to raise capital without diluting voting control. Since preference shareholders typically do not have voting rights, founders and majority shareholders can secure funding without losing decision-making power. Additionally, preference shares are highly flexible financial instruments that companies can use to tailor to meet specific needs, such as issuing cumulative dividends, redemption clauses, or convertibility into ordinary shares. Preference shares are particularly attractive to investors who seek stable returns, as they usually come with fixed dividend payments and priority claims over ordinary shareholders in case of liquidation. From a financial perspective, issuing preference shares can be a strategic move to strengthen a company's capital base without increasing its debt burden, making it an appealing alternative to bank loans or bond issuance. Companies often classify preference shares into different series, such as Series A, Series B, Series C, depending on their financing needs and the stage of business growth. Series A preference shares are commonly issued in the early stages of financing and may include features such as anti-dilution, protection, and liquidation preference, ensuring that early investors receive their returns before ordinary shareholders. As a company progresses and requires more funding, it may issue Series B preference shares with modified terms, such as a higher dividend rate or participation rights, to attract new investors while maintaining fairness for earlier shareholders. Series C and subsequent preference shares often come into play when companies reach later stage funding rounds or need capital for expansion. The structure of different series of preference shares allows businesses to customize investor rights and obligations based on the company's evolving needs, creating a more flexible and strategic capital raising process. While preference shares offer several advantages, they also come with drawbacks. One of the main benefits for companies is the ability to raise substantial capital while keeping control intact, making preference shares a favored option for founders and family-run businesses. Furthermore, companies can customize the terms to suit their financial strategy, whether through cumulative dividends, redemption options, or convertibility into ordinary shares. These features make preference shares appealing to risk-averse investors who prioritize steady returns over speculative equity gains. However, the fixed dividend obligation can become a burden, especially during financial downturns when cash flow is limited. Unlike ordinary shares, which only receive dividends when profits are declared, preference shareholders are often entitled to their dividends regardless of the company's profitability. This can strain a company's finances if not managed properly. Additionally, having multiple classes of preference shares can complicate corporate governance and shareholder management, especially if there are conflicting rights among different investors. From a taxation perspective, dividends on preference shares are not tax deductible like loan interest payments, which means companies must carefully consider their financial position before opting for this route. The issuance of preference shares is common in various business scenarios. A fintech startup raising its first round of funding may issue Series A preference shares to venture capital investors, offering them a fixed 7% annual dividend and liquidation preference, while ensuring founders retain control of the company. A family-owned restaurant chain looking to expand its operations may issue non-voting preference shares with a fixed 5% dividend, attracting local investors while maintaining family ownership. In another case, a manufacturing company facing financial difficulties might issue redeemable preference shares to a private equity firm, providing the firm with an 8% dividend. In another case, a manufacturing company facing financial difficulties might issue redeemable preference shares to a private equity firm, providing the firm with an 8% dividend and a redemption clause that allows them to exit the company once the company's financials stabilizes. These scenarios illustrate how preference shares can be tailored to meet specific financial and strategic needs, making them a versatile tool for corporate fundraising. From a legal and business standpoint, preference shares can be a valuable financing mechanism when used correctly. They allow companies to secure capital without immediate dilution or voting rights, making them especially useful for startups, family businesses, and private enterprises seeking investment. However, companies must carefully draft their shareholder agreements and company constitutions to ensure that the rights and obligations of preference shareholders are clearly defined, avoiding potential disputes in the future. Investors considering preference shares must weigh the benefits of fixed returns and priority claims against the limitations of having no voting rights and potential restrictions on participation in future growth. Ultimately, whether a company should issue preference shares depends on its long-term financial strategy, cash flow stability, and governance objectives. Proper legal structuring and financial planning are essential to maximizing the benefits of preference shares while mitigating risks. That's all for today. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.